The tension is electric as John Kennedy leans in, smirking, and tells Rand Paul the unthinkable. Trump won't sign anything with your name on it. Shock fills the room, sarcasm, political fire, and pure audacity collide in one explosive moment. This isn't just politics. It's a viral spectacle you won't be able to look away from.
Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this weekend I watched, probably like you, a number of folks go on television and confidently predict that we were going to be out of the shutdown. Some said as early as Wednesday. One confidently predicted Thursday. A couple more said Friday. So when I came back on Monday, I was pretty sanguine about things. It gives me no joy to say this, but I was wrong. I don't know, as bad as this multiple vehicle pileup looks from the outside, you ought to see it from the inside. I know you know what I'm talking about, Mr. President. The Republicans have voted 14 times to come out of the shutdown. My Democratic friends have voted 14 times to stay shut down. And I think it's going to be like that for a while. I used to have a beagle, Mr. President. I loved him to death. His name was Roger. He was a rascal. Roger would run off. He was a rabbit dog that we picked up as a stray. Roger would run off for 3 days, scare me to death. I was afraid he was going to die. And after 3 days, he'd come staggering back home, and he always had roadkill in his mouth. And he would hide that roadkill under my back porch. And where we are now, in negotiating out of this shutdown, looks like something Roger used to hide under my back porch. We're supposed to have a vote tomorrow. We don't know what we're voting on, but we've been promised we're going to have a vote. And I hope we do. And I hope I'm wrong. And I hope we come out of this shutdown very soon. But I'm not going to lie to the American people. I think we're going to be in it for a while. Now, as everyone knows, folks aren't being paid while we're in a shutdown. Our air traffic controllers are not being paid. In fact, starting tomorrow, the airlines are going to be canceling flights. Our staffs are not being paid. Federal employees are not being paid. These young men and women here, our pages, are not being paid. Our military is only being partially paid. I'm confused about SNAP payments. Some say the payments are being made. Some say they aren't. I don't know who's telling the truth, but I do know this. I don't think anybody wants to see anybody hungry in America. The only people that I can ascertain who are being paid are members of Congress. Now, I'm not being paid. I said I wasn't going to take a salary during the shutdown. Some of my colleagues are, and I'm not judging anybody. The purpose of this is not to judge anybody. I'm just saying that it's time that Congress set an example. I've got 2 bills I'm going to offer up today. The first one is called the No Shutdown Paychecks to Politicians Act. This just says that while we're in a shutdown, members of Congress don't get paid, and they don't get back pay. The second bill is entitled Withhold Member Pay During Shutdowns Act. That bill says while we're in a shutdown, members of Congress don't get paid, but they will get paid. They'll get their money in arrears after we open government back up. Now, I'm rather fond of the Constitution, as most people are. I'm well aware of the 27th Amendment, which says no law varying the compensation of the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. What that means, of course, is that you can't change the pay for a congressman until after you've had an election. I think my bills are constitutional. for two reasons. Number one, we're not changing the rate of compensation. We're just saying during a shutdown, you're not going to get your money. Number two, there is precedent for this. Back in 2013, President Obama had Congress pass what's called the No Budget, No Pay Act of 2013. President Obama's bill said, look, Congress is about to go into a shutdown. Fine, have at it. Knock yourselves out. Go into a shutdown. But if you don't come out of that shutdown by this particular date, you're not going to get paid. And you know what? Members of Congress had an epiphany. They had a Damascene moment. They were born again. They got out of the shutdown in time to be paid. I'm not trying to put down anybody. I'm not trying to condemn folks who have been taking their salary. I'm not saying they don't earn every bit of it, but I am saying what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and I'm going to offer up these two bills for the members' consideration. So, starting with my first bill, which would say members of Congress can't be paid and don't get back pay even after we end the shutdown. That's called the No Shutdown Paychecks to Politicians Act. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of my bill, that bill, which I just described, which is at the desk. I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object. I think it's time that instead of closing the government down further, that we begin to open up government. What I will offer is legislation that instead of closing government down further, begins to pay those who are working, pays our soldiers, pays our air traffic controllers, pays everyone who's showing up for work. I think this should become a permanent feature of our government. I think it's disruptive, I think it's unfair, and I think it's wrong that we don't pay the workers that are showing up. But a better way than isolating out different groups and punishing different groups is to actually pay those who are working. And I think we should do this. If we pass this legislation, this would never be a problem again. We're going to run into disagreements in the future. We're going to have times when the government shuts down, but there's no reason that we shouldn't be paying our government workers. So I ask that the senator modify his request so that instead of the Senate proceeding to the immediate consideration of calendar item 191, that S3012, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to consider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Mr. President.
Would the senator modify his request?
I will not, Mr. President, and I'd like to explain why. I understand Senator Paul is making a good point. What he's saying is, rather than saying, as I am, that nobody else is being paid, so members of Congress shouldn't be paid, I think what Senator Paul is saying, let's pay everybody. That's what I understand him to be saying. And he wants me to agree to that instead of my bill. What Senator Paul is proposing is Senator Ron Johnson's shutdown, No Shutdown Act that we voted on several times. And I'm for it. I voted for it several times. Here's the problem I have with Senator Paul's proposal of pulling down my bill and going with Senator Johnson's bill. Several reasons. Number one, I'm interested in passing something. I'm not interested in just putting on a show. My bill will pass the House of Representatives, and my bill will be signed by the President. Senator Paul's bill, I can assure you, will not pass the House of Representatives, and President Trump will not sign it. I'm not saying someone's right or somebody's wrong. President Trump does not consider to be Senator Paul to be part of his MAGA agenda, and he will veto it. And then we're right back to square one. So for that reason, I can't substitute his for mine, because his is going to be as dead as fried chicken here in a few days, and mine has a chance to pass. Now, I need some clarification, Mr. President, parliamentary inquiry, if you will. Do I understand that Senator Paul has objected to my bill? Correctly?
The senator from Kentucky asked if you would modify your request.
The senator from Kentucky asked if you would modify your request.
And his modification, if I might ask, is to substitute his bill for mine.
That is the understanding of the chair.
Okay, I have said I will not substitute his bill for mine.
Objection to the modification is heard.
Objection to the modification is heard.
Is there an
Okay,
objection to the
now,
Is there an objection to the original request?
Reserving the right, Mr. President,
Senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object. I think it's actually not clear at all that the president wouldn't sign a bill to continue paying federal workers. I think it's actually a universal sentiment among both parties, among the American people, particularly among the soldiers, that we ought to continue to pay the soldiers, continue to pay the workers. I'm perhaps the most conservative member of the Senate. I vote to cut spending on everything. I think we spend way too much, but I'm not for cutting the salaries of people who have a contract and who are doing their work. Now, I probably would not hire new people, and I would probably let the federal government shrink gradually through attrition because I think we need to be smaller. But if you work for government, you're doing your job, and you have a contract, I think you ought to be paid. So I don't think it's not clear that the president wouldn't support this. I think it's actually quite confusing that this is being objected by the Democrats. And I think actually it'd be nice to let the Democrats, have a round at this and explain to us why they don't want to pay the air traffic controllers. Look, we can have a dispute over spending. I think the Republican proposal spends too much. I think the Democrat proposal spends too much. But I think we ought to pay the workers while we're working out the debate over what the spending level ought to be. I think it's actually an untenable position of Democrats to come before this body and say, oh, we want to give subsidies to people who make $225,000 a year. That's what they're arguing for. The Obamacare subsidies are not the basic subsidies. These are add-on subsidies that started 2 years ago. If you make $100,000 a year, the Democrats want to give you $13,000. Meanwhile, people who make $20,000 and are on food stamps are not going to get food stamps, but somebody making $100,000 is going to get $13,000. That doesn't sound like the Democrats are for the working class or for the poor. It sounds like the Democrats are for people making $200,000 a year to get a subsidy. But I think in the midst of all this, with pressure, I think the Democrats could be made to understand and support paying the government workers. I mean, I just think it is something eminently reasonable. I think it is something very passable, and I don't see the president objecting to this. I think the president would sign this in a heartbeat. So I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Chair recognizes the senator from
could I ask
Louisiana.
for clarification? I have offered in a bill to say that Congress does not get paid like everyone else is not being paid during the shutdown. There's been a little bit back and forth. As I understand it, Senator Paul has objected to that bill. Is that correct?
The senator from Kentucky objected to your unanimous consent request.
To my bill to keep, say Congress isn't paid during the shutdown. Is that correct?
To the bill you ask unanimous consent to pass, he objected
Okay.
to the unanimous
All right.
consent.
I want to bring up my second bill. It's called the Withhold Member Pay During Shutdowns Act. Remember, my first bill that Senator Paul objected to would have said members of Congress don't get paid, just like our staffs don't get paid, just like air traffic controllers don't get paid, just like the military doesn't get paid. We don't get paid until the shutdown is lifted, and we don't get our money in arrears. In other words, we don't recoup our money once the shutdown is lifted. Perhaps Senator Paul will find my second bill to be more palatable to him and his pocketbook.
The moment Senator John Kennedy delivered that explosive line, the entire room froze as if the oxygen had been sucked out in an instant. Reporters leaned forward, congressional aides paused mid-note, and even Senator Rand Paul shot a quick glance across the table because the message behind Kennedy's comment wasn't subtle. It was a direct signal, a political flare fired straight into the air. Donald Trump isn't going to put his signature on anything he doesn't want associated with his name. The tension that followed wasn't ordinary tension, it was the kind that makes even seasoned politicians sit a little straighter, knowing the room had just shifted from routine discussion to high-stakes confrontation. Every eye flickered, every pen paused, and every unspoken thought seemed amplified in the silence that followed. It was a moment that demanded attention, a reminder that in politics, words can carry more weight than actions, and a single sentence can shift the balance of power instantly. Behind the surface of Kennedy's bold delivery, Rand Paul's reaction revealed its own story. His expression didn't break, but the subtle tightening of his jaw, the precise way he straightened in his seat, and the measured calm in his breathing showed he fully understood the implications. This wasn't about paperwork or legislative procedure, it was about power, ownership, and the political weight of Trump's name. In Washington, a signature isn't just ink on paper, it's influence, responsibility, and a calculated risk rolled into one. Paul's careful observation highlighted the delicate balance every politician must maintain between principle, strategy, and the public eye, and reminded viewers that politics often unfolds in micro-expressions and silent calculations rather than loud debates. Meanwhile, the mention of Trump even indirectly carried its own gravitational force. His presence in political conversations, even when absent, can tilt a room and redirect the energy of everyone present. Kennedy's comment wasn't just a quip, it was a reminder of Trump's influence, his brand, and the way a single decision from him can make or break legislative momentum. Attaching Trump's name to any bill is more than symbolic, it is a signal to the public, to party allies, and to critics, with consequences that can ripple far beyond the immediate room. It's a lesson in political gravity. Certain names command attention, respect, and caution, shaping behavior and reactions even without uttering a word. The unspoken drama between Kennedy and Paul underscores the intricate chessboard of political interaction. Kennedy's tone carried confidence and authority, almost daring observers to underestimate the subtle message he was delivering. Paul, in contrast, remained composed, calculating his words and expressions with the precision of a strategist who understands that every reaction, however small, will be analyzed and dissected in the media and by constituents alike. These micro-interactions, seemingly small, are in fact seismic in the world of politics. They reveal the invisible forces that shape decisions, alliances, and public perception. And they show the audience that leadership is often exercised in gestures, glances, and timing as much as in speeches or votes. Beyond the personalities in the room, the bigger narrative points to identity, influence, and legacy. Kennedy's pointed remark highlighted the control that Trump wields over his own political brand, refusing to lend his signature casually, while Paul's measured reaction showed the delicate navigation required when dealing with such a figure. It's a demonstration that political survival requires not just knowledge of the rules, but an instinct for timing, perception, and leverage. In this high-stakes environment, understanding when to speak and when to remain silent can determine reputations, alliances, and the trajectory of one's career. By the time the exchange concluded, viewers were left with more than just a quote or a clip to dissect. They were given a window into the subtle theater of power, the tension of ambition, and the weight of legacy. Kennedy's sharp delivery, Paul's careful response, and Trump's looming influence together create a narrative that is as instructive as it is compelling. For the audience, it's an invitation to look deeper, to see beyond headlines, and to understand that even a single line can expose the invisible currents that drive political decision-making. It is a reminder that in politics, every word, glance, and pause carries meaning, and those who understand the language of influence know exactly how to navigate the room and exactly when to hold back.